The sun sat high above Naval Base Coronado, a relentless white glare bouncing off concrete and steel. The Pacific wind cut sharp across the open training yard, carrying the distant sound of drills, shouted commands, the rhythmic slam of boots on asphalt. A new batch of recruits stood at attention, boots lined like tombstones, eyes forward, shoulders square, some too stiff, some too cocky. Admiral Jackson Reed moved through the ranks like a prowling wolf in dress blues, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't need a clipboard or a file. The man had a memory like steel and eyes that measured men faster than a rifle scope. 40 years in the teams, his name carried weight. Stories. Rumors. Some said he'd once taken out a warlord with a shovel. Others said he'd died twice in Syria. He never confirmed any of it. He didn't have to. The recruits braced tighter as he passed, some stealing glances, others frozen with the kind of fear only earned through stories told in shadows. He stopped. One figure, off to the side, caught his eye. Not because she moved she hadn't twitched, but because she didn't look at him like the others did. No awe, no fear, just presence. Controlled. Quiet. Measured like a blade before it's drawn. She was average height, lean, buzzed hair just long enough to betray a curl. The standard fatigues didn't hang on her like most they settled. She didn't fidget, didn't squint in the Sunday. He let the silence drag a second too long. Then, with a voice half amused, half sharp, he let the words fly. "Let's loosen the mood," Reed said, walking slowly to the center of the group. "Call signs. Who's got a good one?" A couple of recruits chuckled. One muttered something about crater and got an elbow in the ribs. Reed's grin widened. "Come on, you've all been trying to earn one. Let's hear 'em." He pointed to a lanky kid with nervous eyes. "You. What do they call you?" Sir. Rabbit, sir." "Fitting," Reed muttered. A few laughs followed. He turned again, scanning, then pointed to her, the quiet one. "You. What's your call sign?" It wasn't a question, it was a prompt for performance. Her eyes met his. No hesitation, no edge. "Iron Widow," she said. 2 words. Flat, cold, final. The wind didn't move, but something shifted. Something heavy. The grins faded. Reed blinked once, slow. A tick behind his composed mask flickered something almost invisible. Then nothing. But it was too late. He'd heard the name before. Long ago. But not here. Not in the open. Not from a living voice. A story buried in redacted files and late-night whispers in war rooms. A SEAL team wiped off the grid. Survivors dragged out by someone no one ever named. All they said was ***, she wouldn't die. ***, that she carried her dead husband on her back while firing with the other hand. And now she stood here, in standard boots, not a scar in sight, just presence. "Iron Widow," he repeated softer. The air had lost its warmth. Around her, no one laughed. One recruit swallowed hard. Another blinked, recognizing the name but unsure from where. Reed straightened, his next words stuck in his throat. Not fear, not regret. Just the sudden, piercing realization that sometimes the ghosts they mythologize walk among them, not as shadows, but as soldiers. He gave a sharp nod and turned without another word. The game was over. And no one asked for call signs again. The wind in Calafir wasn't like wind anywhere else. It didn't whisper, it scraped, carried sand like shrapnel and heat like judgment. The sky had no color, just an angry glare that pressed down like a curse. Lieutenant Mara Voss stepped off the transport with boots already caked in dust. The extraction op was supposed to be simple: secure the asset, evac the team, be back in the air before the sun hit its peak. But in places like Calafir, simple didn't last past sunrise. The convoy rolled through the narrow village roads like slow-moving targets. Children scattered at first, then didn't. That was the first sign. The ones who stayed behind stared too long. Didn't blink. Some held nothing in their hands. Others held secrets. Something's off, Mara murmured to the man beside her. Captain Jonas Voss' husband, team lead, stubborn optimist, just gave her that familiar crooked grin. You always say that, he replied. And I'm usually right, she said, eyes scanning the rooftops. She was. The blast came 30 seconds later. An IED buried beneath the front transport shredded steel and bone alike, flipping the Humvee like a child's toy. Gunfire followed a chaos symphony of rattling metal, screamed commands, blood hitting dirt. Mara didn't freeze. She moved. Rifle up, orders out, dragging wounded behind cover, returning fire between breaths. Jonas didn't make it to the wall. He was behind her 1 second. On the ground the next, clutching his side, red blooming fast and wide. No medevac. The radio crackled. LZ's hot. Repeat hot. Mara's heart didn't skip. It sank, but it didn't skip. She applied pressure with one hand and fired with the other. There was too much blood, too much noise. Jonas looked up at her, breath shallow. You gotta go. Shut up. Mara. I said shut up. Her voice cracked, just once. When the dust settled, only 6 remained out of 15. 3 of them couldn't walk. 1 couldn't breathe without gurgling. She hoisted them, one by one. Carried them through shattered alleys, through sniper eyes she swore she felt on her skin, through silence that rang louder than gunfire. 2 bullets caught her in the left arm and thigh. She didn't stop. Hours later, they reached a secondary evac point, more dirt, less hope. She collapsed after the last wounded man was lifted onto the bird. Mara sat against the wheel of the ruined Humvee, blood drying on her flak vest, eyes locked on nothing. She didn't cry. Not then. Not even when they zipped Jonas into a bag that looked too small for the man he had been. Not even when command debriefed her like she was a malfunctioning drone. She cried 3 weeks later, in a supply closet, alone. The team that survived called her Iron Widow behind her back at first. Not as an insult, as a prayer, as a warning, as a myth born from blood and sand. Because she didn't shatter, because metal bends, but she never did. The war room smelled of salt and gun oil. Screens flickered on the walls, casting cold light across a table scarred with years of elbows and fists and classified briefings. Maps bled into one another across digital grids, coordinates shifting like ghosts of battles still being fought. Admiral Reed stood at the head of the room, one hand braced on the table, the other hanging loose at his side. His knuckles were white. Outside, the training yard buzzed faintly, but it was a different kind of noise now. The recruits weren't joking anymore. They weren't whispering either. Their eyes followed Mara Voss like a tide pulling toward something larger, something heavy. She didn't glance at them. She simply walked when called, boots tapping steady across the concrete, head held neither high nor low. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't claiming anything. She just moved forward like someone who had walked out of fire and hadn't forgotten the heat. Reed had always been unshakable. He'd been hit, stabbed, concussed, had a helicopter door slam across his spine, and still crawled out grinning. But when she stepped through the threshold of the war room and stopped opposite him, his composure shifted, just enough to betray a flicker behind his eyes, a memory surfacing without permission. He had served alongside Jonas Voss once, long before the gray streaked his temples. Jonas was the kind of man who made you believe in impossible odds. The after-action report from Calafir had been blunt. Catastrophic ambush, heavy casualties, limited survivors. Extraction, credited to unknown operative. No one at command ever filled in the blanks. The survivors had said little. Rumors, mostly, about a woman dragging men through fire. Reed had assumed it was exaggeration, soldiers' myth-making to explain why they weren't dead. He'd never questioned it again. Until now. She didn't salute, she just stood there. Her eyes were dark but not cold. Her posture was perfect but not rigid. She waited. He cleared his throat. The words he'd meant to use, authority, inspection, assessment, dissolved before they left his mouth. You were there, he said. Not a question. I was, she answered. You pulled them out, he said. Yes. Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of servers and the faint roar of surf beyond the base. Reed lowered himself into a chair and gestured to the one opposite. Sit. She did. Slow. Deliberate. He looked at her hands resting on her knees, fingers scarred, knuckles pale. Why didn't you ever come forward? There's no forward, she said. There's just what's left. He swallowed. I didn't know. I should have known. No one asked, she said. Her voice wasn't bitter. It was factual, a line item in a ledger no one had balanced. For the first time in years, Reed felt the weight of a salute he'd never given. He'd buried Jonas Voss in his own memory, but had never pictured who carried the rest of him out. Now she sat across from him, alive, steady, not asking for anything. He leaned back, something loosening in his chest, something breaking too. Iron Widow, he murmured. They weren't exaggerating. They didn't know the half of it, she said softly. No rank, no ego, just two people at a table haunted by the same ghosts, finally staring them in the face. By the next sunrise, the base was quieter, not in sound, but in spirit. The laughter still came, but it was softer now, more measured. Recruits still joked, still ran drills, still compared bruises and timings, but the tone had shifted. Something unspoken had settled over them like mist after gunfire, weight without form, reverence without command. They didn't say her name, not loudly, not often, but when they did, it wasn't with mockery or misunderstanding. Iron Widow Times had become more than a call sign. It was a ghost in the halls, a presence in the corners of conversation. Not a myth times a warning, a standard, a story too heavy for most to carry. Asterisk. No one asked for call signs after that, not because it was banned, but because suddenly the game had rules they weren't ready to play. Voss didn't change. She still ran at dawn, still hit harder, faster, longer, still said less than anyone else. But now they noticed. Now they watched. When she adjusted her gloves, a few of them checked theirs. When she paused before the pull-up bar, they fell into step behind her, waiting, not trying to go first. Some saluted when she passed. She never saluted back. She didn't have to. Admiral Reed said nothing for days. He watched from his perch in the tower or from the shadows of the war room, watched the ripple she left by standing still, watched recruits grow quieter around her, not intimidated, but sharpened, focused, asterisk, changed, asterisk. He found himself reading the Calafir report again, not the redacted version, the real one. The one with phrases like asterisk, bled out in the open, asterisk and asterisk, refused morphine, asterisk and asterisk, returned fire while dragging casualties. Asterisk, there were names on that list he hadn't thought about in years. Men he'd served with. One of them had his picture on Reed's wall. He stared at that photo a long time, wondering how many lives were still breathing because one woman didn't break. And when the orders came down, when her transfer papers were signed and stamped, Reed requested to deliver them personally, not by email, not through command chain, hand to hand. The final morning arrived like any other gray, wind-swept, boots stomping, voices barking, but there was something different in the air. Word had spread. No one was ordered to assemble. No orders had been given, but when Voss stepped onto the tarmac with her gear strapped tight and her eyes forward, the recruits were already there. 2 rows, full formation, not a sound. No clapping, no ceremony, just presence. Reed met her at the chopper. He handed her the file but didn't let go right away. Their eyes met. And in that space between breath and protocol, he spoke low and clear. This woman, he said, turning slightly so the recruits could hear, carries the silence of 10 graves and still reports for duty. No one moved. The rotors began to turn. Voss nodded once, turned, and stepped aboard. She didn't wave. She didn't look back. As the chopper rose, dust kicking up in a fury around them, Admiral Reed raised his hand in salute, not the crisp, regulation-bound gesture of a ranking officer, but a slower, deeper motion. One forged not by training but by understanding. He didn't salute Iron Widow. He saluted Mara Voss, not as an admiral, but as a man who finally understood what it cost to survive.